So I'm old enough to have actually gone and seen the previous D&D film in the theaters. I was around 20, I think, 19 or 20 years old when that film came out, and I loved Jeremy Irons. Jeremy Irons was and is an amazing actor, and I love D&D with all my heart. But that film was one of the worst pieces of cinema I have ever sat through and witnessed. And I lived in Colorado at the time, and was uh, going. I went into that theater with a little bit of creative enhancement, shall we say, from the Devil's Lettuce. And even with the creative enhancement, that movie was still one of the worst pieces I've ever seen. And I came out of that theater going, they just did D&D dirty. So going into this film, I was a little trepidatious about what was in store for me and fans of Dungeons and Dragons because um, yeah, the last one was so bad. And I love Chris Pine. I mean, Michelle Rodriguez is pretty awesome as well. I've seen a lot of her stuff over the years and really enjoyed it. But Chris Pine, this guy can do no wrong in my mind. Like I've loved everything he's ever done. It also doesn't hurt that he's easy on the eyes, as Chris will tell you. But if you've never watched some of his dramatic work, like Hell or High Water, where him and his brother Ben, I forget their actor's last name, are the brothers, going on a robbing spree to save the family ranch. Like that movie is just, or Outlaw King, another phenomenal Chris Pine performance. I loved the Kelvin timeline movies with him, Star Trek stuff. So I like Chris Pine, but even so, one or two actors can't save a film. Hugh Grant, I was expecting something fun and quirky as a bad guy because he's been doing some fun and quirky bad guy stuff recently. Like if you haven't seen The Gentleman by Guy Ritchie, his turn in that was absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, went into this film with very low expectations and came away genuinely surprised by how good this movie was. Forgetting for a moment the OGL controversy, a lot of people are like, "I'm gonna boycott the D&D film." Yeah, I was not in that camp. Yes, I didn't care for what they did with the OGL, and I made a lot of videos about it and complained about it. And our tabletop source book and materials have moved away from fifth edition because of that. Um, but I wasn't boycotting any of the Dungeons and Dragons products, just tabletop stuff. And the film was really, really good. Like honestly, like I said, I went in with no expectations and came away genuinely surprised. So let's get this out of the way right off the bat. In terms of this being a review, 8 out of 10. Like, we'll talk about why I gave it an 8 out of 10 over the course of this video, but this was a great movie. Genuinely fun. Chris and I laughed probably a dozen times throughout the film. It had really good comedy. Some of the comedy was a little over the top, like some of the slapstick stuff didn't quite land, and that's ultimately one of the reasons why I dropped it from a 10 out of 10 and brought it down to an 8 out of 10 is because some of that comedy was a little over the top, and the writing, while it was really good, again, some of the jokes were a little too much. It was like, yeah, really, you didn't need to push it that hard. And then some of the special effects were a little weak, not a lot, but the dragons in particular I felt were very poorly done. Not very, I shouldn't use the word very, but looking at like Smog from Peter Jackson's Hobbit films being 10-ish or more years old now, Smog takes the cake for like one of the best dragon representations I've ever seen on film. And as old as that film was, given the dating on it, it's still that dragon looked way better than the dragons they gave us in this film. I didn't care if there was three dragons in this one. There was the big fat dragon in the underworld. There was the Underdark, I should say. There was the acid dragon that they showed during one of the flashback sequences, and then there was the stone dragon they did during that final battle sequence towards the end. Neither one of the none of those dragons looked that great to me. So ultimately, between a little bit of botched VFX here and there and some over the top writing and jokes, those are the only nitpicks I had with this film. Otherwise, it was a great, great, great movie. Performances were awesome. Some of the comedy was just so spot on, like the sequence where they're breaking out. Michelle Rodriguez's character and Chris Pine's character, and they're battling in the streets. and he's like trying to get the ropes off of his wrist, and he's like trying to cut him on the steps, and then he's trying to get the sword, and meanwhile she takes out like the entire squad of soldiers by herself, as a true barbarian could and should. And then he gets up at the end and smacks the guy in the face with his lute. Like that was a truly comedic scene, and it worked really, really, really well for those characters. And I loved how it was pulled off. Like you just genuinely got a good chuckle out of it. There was also, I just, like I said at the beginning, Hugh Grant's kind of skeevy scumbag of a con man. It was Hugh Grant doing what Hugh Grant does best, and his performance was what I've come to expect from him, kind of in these like as hammy as Jeremy Irons' performance was in the other D&D film, Hugh Grant's performance was also a little hammy and over the top, but it fit well, like for that kind of sleazy con man that we all wanted to see on screen. And I think that's ultimately one of the things we got out of this film, was something that we all wanted to see on screen. It felt like a genuine D&D like adventure. I think the most adventurous section for me, the part that felt the most like a really well done D&D session, was the main heist, where they've got to get into the vault and you know do that whole thing, and the sequence where they've got the the scepter of teleportation, where hither thither, I think is what it was called, where he can what he can see, he can put a portal like 500 meters away, and they can go between that point, and they put it on the painting and then smuggle the painting into a wagon, which then in turn that gets taken into the vault, so that then as long as they're within the 500 meters, like they'll be able to get into the vault that way, because they've put it on that painting, which is an object they see and know. Like that whole sequence was very, very well done. Especially having uh the druid with her wild form, leveraging her character a lot throughout the film was really well done. But I also like the fact that they didn't use magic as a solve all the problems type scenario, especially when we get to the final sequence and they've got the anti magic bracelet on and they can't use magic. Like, hey everyone, Renfail here with the commercial part of the video where I say, hey, if you like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. And thanks to all of our supporters are here on YouTube and over on Patreon, our highest members, our guild champions, Crazy's relative, Remy D here on YouTube. And don't forget, if you want to support, it's really easy. You can do the memberships below, the Adventurers Guild, 3 different tiers. There's also the super thanks on any uploaded video or YouTube short that you find. There's also, of course, the super chats and stickers that you could do on any live stream or premiere, and the Patreon page if you want to dive into the fantasy world that I have with my brother and my wife, which is a tabletop game, a point and click adventure game, and a fantasy book series. All are great ways to keep this channel going and me going full time. Thanks again for those of you who support. Let's get back to the video that you're watching now. Like, there was a lot of genuine planning that went into some of the adventures that took place in this film, where it wasn't just all about using magic, and I felt that that was very well done. But that heist particular felt really, really well done and very well thought out to me. And I was just the whole way in, I was totally involved and invested, and like, oh, this is so cool. Like, there's a lot of planning, and imagine like the storyboarding that went into figuring out all the angles to make this work. I think that they did a very, very good job. Um, I know a lot of people were over the top with like the owl bear and the mimic and some of the other major creatures that they saw, but for me, it was mostly about just really good acting and feeling like it was an actual party of adventurers who are brought together by chance. And some of them have friendships, but some of them they're just there because of circumstance, a chance to, enemy of my enemy type thing. And so there's this like an uneasy alliance between all of them, but over the course of that adventure, that bond grows and becomes more cohesive and turns into a friendship by the end. And I felt that that was very well done. Um, I also love all of the cameos. So the first one was seeing Bradley Cooper show up as Helga's or Holga's like halfling ex-husband, and that made me laugh, like this giant barbarian with a little halfling. I'm assuming he was a halfling, or was he a gnome? I'm assuming halfling. But I like towards the end of the film how she sees another little halfling and kind of gives him a side eye, and she's like, she's obviously got a thing for small dudes. It was a really good joke, a really good sequence. Do you want to say how much you liked the film last night, the Dungeons and Dragons movie? I'm recording the video right now. How many would you give it out of 1 out of 10? You have got to come on camera and say you're fine. Come here. How many stars out of 10? 1 out of 10. How many would you give it? Well, come here and tell him ocho. So you got to tell. So she just said 8 out of 10, which is what I gave it as well. Here, you got to bend down so that you can see your face in the camera, Chris. 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. You like Chris Pine too. Yeah, not as much as Chris Hemsworth, but thank you, Chris. Yeah, it was yeah, a comedy. It was an adventure comedy. So, um, but Bradley Cooper as the halfling ex-husband was really good. And I don't know how many other cameos there were here, but the one that I just happened to catch out of the corner of my eyes when we were watching the film was Tom Morello was in the crowd watching the maze fight at the end, and I was like, "Ah, ah, 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 ah." That's the Rage Against the Machine guitarist. And also I love, and this was well publicized before the film came out. The characters from the TV show are in the maze, like grabbing the axe from the chest and running through, and then they're at the cage at the end. And I thought that was a fun little throwback to another piece of Dungeons and Dragons property of entertainment over the years, which makes me really interested to see what is the show, the upcoming show they're going to be doing, which is going to be a live action show. If we're going to see the same types of cameos, or if they're going to go with something a little more serious, I don't know. I don't know if I missed any cameos. I'm sure I did because I've only seen it once now. I'll probably watch it again, just to like be more thorough with my watch through. But overall, 8 out of 10, highly entertaining. I was genuinely surprised by this film, genuinely impressed. I don't know that it made enough money for them to do a sequel, but I kind of hope they do. I do know they have a live action show coming, which I'm really eagerly waiting for. I think it's going to be good. But again, I don't know where they're going with that, if it's going to be the same comedic approach or if they're going to go with something more serious. It remains to be seen. As much as I love Forgotten Realms, I like the fact that these directors for this film have gone out there on the record and said they wouldn't mind playing around in other universes within the Dungeons and Dragons property, which opens up the possibilities like a Dragonlance film. And I know they've got a Dragonlance, Joe Manganiello. Joe Manganiello. I always forget how to pronounce his name. The actor who's big into D&D. He's talked about being being behind a Dragonlance project, so that might be something different. Um, anyway, I liked it. 8 out of 10 for me. Love to hear your thoughts. Drop them down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. I'll see everybody in the next episode of whatever comes out on YouTube.